chief guest of the day for the inaugural session of International Conference on Law and Spirituality, His Excellency Governor of Kerala, Shri Arif Mohammed Khan, four-time parliamentarian from the state of Uttar Pradesh. The Honorable Governor is a prolific author of international repute, and his writings about Islam and Sufism are not just academically referred and quoted, but also have a deep social impact in India and across the globe. It is my absolute honor and privilege to welcome Sir on behalf of University of Delhi. Thank you, sir, for joining us and accepting our invitation. I yield the floor to you, sir.
Professor Seema Singh ji, Justice R.C. Lahoti Saab, and the compare of this meeting, Ms. Kajal. First, I would like to compliment the Campus Law Center for organizing this program in collaboration with Ethic Craft Club to probe the bonds between law and spirituality. I would also like to thank you, Dr. Seema Singh ji, for your invite and giving me this opportunity to share my views on this important subject with the academic community who are attending this webinar. Before I come to the subject of law, in order to understand spirituality, I would like to refer to a dialogue between Rishi Narad and Sanat Kumar, which comes to us from Chand Yog Upanishad. Rishi Narad approaches Sanat Kumar and says that I have heard Tarati Shokam Atmvid, the knower of the self crosses the ocean of sorrows. And then he says that I have read all the texts, I have studied all the Vedas, I have studied Shastra Vidya, Nakshatra Vidya, I know them all, but I am not able to cross the ocean of sorrow. Then Sanat Kumar asks, he gives this information in response to a question by Sanat Kumar that tell me what you have studied. Then he gives these details. Then he was told that Atma Vidya, the knowledge of the self, which is a synonym for spirituality, is not theoretical learning, but it is a mode of way of life. It is a way of behavior. And he is told that mantra vide vasvina atmvid, one who has theoretical knowledge, howsoever learned one may be, that does not mean that the person has knowledge of the self, Atma Vidya. By mere theoretical knowledge, we cannot attain our true fulfillment. But then question is, what is this mode of life? Our scriptures have given three cardinal features: Shraddha, Sanyam, and Samarpan. That is devotion, self-control, and dedication to pursue Atma Vidya. So, spirituality is something which tapa swadhyay nirittam, ever devoted to the pursuit of knowledge. And not just theoretical knowledge, but it comes as a result of anubhav, experience. In fact, even in Indian Jain tradition and Buddhist tradition, the word which has been used is Tirthankar. which refers to ocean which one has to cross. And when one has that spiritual experience, face to face with the spirituality, then if I use the lines of Shankaracharya, then one goes beyond the limits, various limits set by various codes. I'm carefully using this word. I'm not using law, religion, morality, ethics, but one goes beyond the limits of several codes. And Shankaracharya has put it beautifully. He says in his Nirvan Shatakam, one shlok says, Na me dvesh rago, na me lobh moh, mado nev menev matsarye bhava, na dharmo, na chartho, na kamo, na moksha, Chidanand Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. Neither do I have hatred. I have risen above that level. Neither do I have hatred nor any attachment for. Neither I have greed nor affection for anybody. Neither pride nor a feeling to dominate over others. I am above the bounds of dharma, artha, dharma, the limit set by righteousness, artha, wealth, kama, desires, and moksha, liberation from human condition, which have been described as 4 purusharth. And I am ever blissful consciousness. I am Shiva, I am Shiva, I am Shiva. So basically the concept of spirituality is that when you are able to free yourself from hatred, from attachment, from greed, from this human desire to dominate over others, that elevates you to the level of Shiva, which is nothing but pure blissful consciousness. Now I come to the law. In any human society, we find there are 2 major domains of human interaction, which have relationship with law. First, the matters which are regulated by the positive law, where human actions are prescribed and regulated by the law, and it is obligatory for everyone to obey these laws. The other is the area of free choice, which includes all those actions in which there is no prescription or regulation, and we have freedom to make, each individual has freedom to make her own choice. Then there is another area which practically has a tremendous bearing on both kinds of interaction which I have mentioned earlier. This is actuated by the moral or ethical attitudes of the individual, which actuates her to obey the positive law strictly, and in matters of choice, she goes for an option which does not hurt anybody or obeys what otherwise is totally unenforceable. Generally, it arises from a consciousness of duty nearly as strong as positive law, and for people who believe in a religion, then it can be described as God consciousness or the consciousness of karma consequences, which prompts them to make a morally correct choice. This is what has been described in the academic circles as obedience of the unenforceable. Here, obedience is purely voluntary and dictated by good conscience and noble motives and intentions. We must remember that mere obedience of law does not measure the greatness of any nation or any society. It can be easily obtained by setting up strong law enforcement agencies. If we look at our own history, in the pre-independence era, for long period of time, the rural India had hardly seen or felt the presence of any government, which means the presence of any law, positive law, or the enforcement agencies. It was through the instrumentality of panchayats which came into being. They were not elected panchayats at that time. No formal elections were held. They came into being by general consensus that people ensured. It was through the instrumentality of these panchayats, this institution, that order and stability was ensured in the society. The power that panchayats exercised were not backed by any coercive methods. The unwritten moral codes ensured the effectiveness of the writs of panchayat. In this context, I recall a short story written by Munshi Premchand, titled as Panch Parmeshwar, which I had read when I was in school. And in fact, I have never read this story after I left the school. It was only after receiving your invite. The impact of the story is so powerful that when I received your invite, asking me to speak on this subject, the first thing which came to my mind was this story by Munshi Premchand. The gist of the story goes like this, that in a village, there are two friends, Jumman Sheikh and Algu Chaudhary. They have grown together. They support each other in various ways. Algu is famous in the village for his his father was a trader, and he possessed considerable wealth. And Jumman Sheikh, being educated, is known for knowledge and wisdom, and people seek his help in matters relating to writing documents or something like that. Now, Jumman Sheikh's auntie was getting old, so she agreed to will her property to him on the promise that her maintenance for life, for the rest of her life, will be Jumman's liability. After the registration of property, Jumman and his wife began neglecting the auntie. This caused her grief, and she calls out for a village panchayat. among all the judges, Algu is made Sarpanch, the head of the jury, which means that he will have the final say in the decision making. Seeing Algu as a judge, Jumman feels very confident and assumes that the decision will be in his favor because his bosom friend is the Sarpanch. But Jumman was wrong. Algu feels the burden of duty and he delivers a fair judgment in favor of auntie. Jumman is shocked to see the betrayal. And now their relations are stated. The friendship is almost over. In addition to that, Jumman starts looking for an opportunity where he can pay back Algu Chaudhary in the same coin. And after some time, this opportunity came. Algu is dragged to the podium of the village panchayat on account of a fight with a man who had bought his bullock. To Algu's horror, Jumman has been chosen as the senior Sarpanch, the supreme judge for this case. However, when Jumman was charged with the judicial duty, he is dictated by his conscience to be fair, and he delivers judgment in favor of Algu Chaudhary and also fines the other party for showing cruelty towards animal who had died. Algu is shocked to find the decision in his favor. He cannot believe that Jumman, who was seeking an opportunity to pay him back, does not dole out a blind decision. After the case, they both hug each other and say that it is God who speaks through a judge, and therefore any injustice in such cases is impossible. And that is what is meant by Panch Parmeshwar. Parmeshwar is speaking through the judge, through the Panch. The moral of the story is that spirituality, this is, one may call God consciousness, but this is rooted in spirituality, Prabhu Bodh, which cannot allow a judge to let his personal biases influence, color the judgment in a judicial dispute. And the impact of the story, I have already told you that as soon as I got your invite, this story came to my mind. And this very powerfully brings out the relationship between law and spirituality. When we look at the cultural history of India, then we find that spirituality is the founding virtue of our country. World over, civilizations and cultures were defined by race, people belonging to the same race, people speaking the same language, or people subscribing to the same faith. For a long period of time, this was the paradigm which defined most of the civilizations. But in India, our thought leaders, that is ancient rishis, chose spirit, that is Atman, as the defining principle. God, transcendent Brahma, dwells in the form of immanent soul, that is Atman, in every living being. And one of our most important scripture, that is Bhagavad Gita, asserts very emphatically, Vidya Vinay Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastani Shuni Chaiv Shwa Pake Cha Pandita Samdarshina. The liberated soul, the emancipated soul, one who has realized spirituality, is one who looks equally upon all, whether he be a man of learning and humility, or one who disbelieves, or whether it is a cow, an elephant, a dog, or a dog eater. Why? Because God, transcendent in the form of God immanent, that is Atma, dwells in each one of them. India believed in the divinity of mankind and gave the concept of Deh is Devale, which means that human body is the temple of God, and that service of mankind is service of God. Manav seva hi Madhav seva hai. The prophet of Indian Renaissance, Swami Vivekananda, has defined the mission of his life, saying, my ideal indeed can be put into a few words, and that is to preach unto mankind. He is not even saying to preach unto Indians or India. He is saying to preach unto mankind their divinity, and how to make it manifest in every movement of life. Speaking about the role of India in the future of the world, Swami Vivekananda said, let the Persian or the Greek, the Roman, the Arab, or the Englishman march his battalions, conquer the world, and link the different nations together, and the philosophy and the spirituality of India are ever ready to flow along the new-made channels into the veins of the nations of the world. The Hindu's calm brain must pour out its own quota to give to the sum total of human progress. India's gift to the world is the light spiritual. The modern West gave the idea of dignity of mankind, from which flow all human rights as outlined by the UN United Nations Charter of Human Rights. The ancient India gave the concept of divinity of mankind, which is much more effective way of establishing dignity, equality, fraternity, and all human rights, as declared by Rig Veda, Ekev Manusho Jati. All mankind are one people, all are interdependent, and all are interconnected. In fact, if we look a bit closely, then one can say that Indian Sanatan tradition makes an all-powerful attempt to divinize the humanity and to humanize the divinity. Srimad Bhagavatam narrates a beautiful anecdote on the subject of the divine potential of man. God incarnate Kapil Muni, during an exposition of his spiritual life to his mother, Dev Ahuti says, अथ माम सर्वेषु भूतेषु भूतात्मानं कीर्तालायम अर्चाये दान मानाभ्यम मैत्रीय अभिनेन चक्षुषा. Therefore, worship me in all beings by practicing respect, man to all beings and removal of their felt wants, that is dan, in a spirit of intimate friendship, maitri, and attitude of non-separateness, abhinnain chakshusha. For I am the one self in all beings and have made a temple for myself in all of them. Now we can make out that if one is trained to believe in the idea of being divine, herself being sacred, then she is bound to develop a chastity of mind and spirit, which would never allow any individual to trespass into the sanctuary of the other. He will, once you have developed this, your mind has been trained, and you have internalized this teaching that everyone is potentially divine. You consider yourself holy and sacred, and you consider any other person as holy and sacred as you are. Then this mind will not allow anybody to trespass into the sanctuary of the other. If according to Swami Vivekananda, it is India's burden to teach unto mankind its divinity, then it becomes incumbent on us to ensure that all our institutions, including the courts, the legal fraternity, those who frame the laws, they all must imbibe and internalize this precious value of Aham Brahmasmi Tattvam Asi. The duty of legal fraternity is to create a robust judicial system that ensures redressal of the grievances of the aggrieved and full and complete justice, and not scoring victory by virtue of eloquence or on technical grounds. This implies both self-restraint and showing fair consideration for the victims of the circumstances, which comes easily if we develop a spiritual orientation. The idea of spirituality is nothing but stepping into the shoes of the other and being conscious of the laws of karma, which means to have a mind and heart which can feel the pain of the other and which will never allow anybody to do something to the other which is hurtful or hateful to one personally. Finally, the question is who are the people? When we accept this, the basic principle of divine nature of man, as outlined by the Vedanta, we discover a new focus of human freedom, dignity, equality, and redemption built into themselves and waiting only to be discovered and unfolded. Through spiritual growth, they become focus of human virtues, including justice and compassion. It is through people who have been, as I said earlier, whose minds are trained, who succeed in internalizing these teachings. It is through such women and men alone that society can become just and grow to its full potential. These individuals, imbued with the spirit of compassion and justice, have been described in our tradition as dheers, and who display the virtues of intelligence, courage, and steely resolve. One of our classic poet, Bhartari Hari, in his Niti Shatak, has sung the glory of these dheers, where he says, Nindantu niti nipun, yadiva istuvantu, Lakshmi sama vistu, gachatu va yatheshtam, adyeva va banana mastu yugantareva, nyay yad pathat, pirvi chalanti, padam nadhira. Let jurist blame or praise. Let Lakshmi come or go away as she pleases. Let death come just now or 100 years later. The dheers never deviate an inch from the path of Nyaya, justice or righteousness. And what is the source of this extraordinary strength of these dheers? Is it Bahubal, physical power? Is it Arthik Bal, economic power? Is it Buddhi Bal, intellectual power? No. Our tradition clearly says it is Atm Bal, it is Naitik Bal, and somewhere it has also been described as Yoga Bal, the moral or spiritual power, the common inheritance of every woman and man. This power is not any esoteric or magical power, but the strength of character and conviction driving from the unfolding of the divine in the heart of man. And it has been very succinctly declared by the Kena Upanishad, which says, Atmana vindate viryam. It is the knowledge of the self which bestows the real energy which makes you into a dheer purush. So it is these dheers who have the power and potential to take the nation on the path of power and glory. Finally, once again, I would like to thank you, Dr. Seema Singh Ji, for your invite. And I hope that I congratulate you for taking this initiative and organizing these series of lectures. And I'm hopeful that these lectures will provide stimulating food for thought for not only for the legal fraternity, but also lawmakers whose duty is to make laws which are informed by spiritual ethos. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Jai Hind. Thank you very much.